His hands were shaking. Not from the cold. Not from exhaustion. He was staring at a phone propped against a cereal box, pausing a video for the 9th time, whispering the same 4 words to an empty kitchen. Please just work this time. Because in 6 hours, his daughter was going to walk into that school gym, and he refused to let her walk in looking like nobody loved her enough to try. Marcus Webb had built spreadsheets for a living. He solved problems for a living. Give him a broken engine, a leaking faucet, a tax form nobody else wanted to touch. He'd figure it out, given enough coffee and enough time. Hair was different. For 8 years, that had been Elena's department. She was the one who knew the difference between a French braid and a fishtail, who kept bows organized by color in a drawer nobody else was allowed to touch. Marcus had watched her do it 1,000 mornings over breakfast, half paying attention, always assuming there'd be time to learn it properly later. There was no later anymore. It had been 11 months. Long enough that the house didn't feel like a crime scene of memory every single morning. Long enough that Marcus could function, get his daughter Sophie to school, get himself to work, get something resembling dinner on the table most nights. But some mornings still undid him without warning. Today's was going to be tomorrow. Tomorrow was the fall showcase. The one event every second grader at Lincoln Elementary had been buzzing about for weeks. Tomorrow, Sophie wanted her hair, like Emma's mom does it. A French braid. Sophie had shown him a photo 3 days ago, eyes bright, completely unaware of the small earthquake she'd just caused in her father's chest. He'd smiled and said, "Sure, baby, I got you." He did not in fact got her. The first attempt happened right after Sophie went to bed, at 9:47 p.m., using a wig he'd bought off a mannequin head from a beauty supply store, a purchase that had earned him a strange look from the cashier he hadn't bothered explaining. He typed into YouTube, "How to French braid hair for beginners." 240 results. He picked the one with the most views. A woman with perfectly manicured nails moving through someone's cat's hair like water through fingers, smooth and instant. Marcus tried to mimic her. His fingers felt like they belonged to someone else. The strands slipped out of order. The pattern collapsed into something closer to a knot than a braid. He tried again, and again. By 11:30, 3 failed attempts sat behind him like small defeats, and something in his chest had started to tighten. The same tightness that used to show up right before Elena's diagnosis, when he'd sit in waiting rooms pretending to read magazines he never saw a single word of. He caught his reflection in the dark kitchen window. A grown man, alone, fighting a wig at midnight. He almost laughed. He almost didn't. Midnight came and went. He rewound the video for the 6th time, then the 7th, muting his own frustration each time so it wouldn't wake Sophie down the hall. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago. He drank it anyway, because getting up to make more felt like admitting defeat, and he wasn't ready for that yet. Around 1 a.m., something shifted. He stopped trying to copy the video move for move and started actually watching the way she separated 3 even strands, the rhythm of pulling one section under before crossing another over it. Not fast, not perfect, just steady, patient, repeatable. His 4th attempt held for 4 full seconds before falling apart in his hands. His 5th attempt held for 10, somewhere near 1:40 a.m. Consenting Ken. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister Rachel, checking in the way she'd been doing every week since the funeral. "You doing okay tonight?" He typed back. "Learning to braid hair from a wig. Currently losing." She sent back 3 laughing emojis, and then, a moment later, "Elena would be so proud you're even trying." "That's not nothing, Marcus." He set the phone down and didn't answer right away. His throat had gone tight in a way that had nothing to do with the wig, or the hour, or the coffee gone cold beside him. He picked the strands back up and started again, slower this time, letting his fingers memorize the motion instead of racing to finish it. At 1:55, he heard the floor creak behind him. Sophie stood in the doorway in her pajamas, hair wild from sleep, holding her stuffed rabbit by one ear. "Daddy? Why are you awake?" His stomach dropped. If she saw the wig, if she realized what he was doing and why, the surprise would be gone. Worse, she might realize just how hard this was for him, and Sophie had learned enough about hard things this year already. She didn't need to carry this one too. He shifted his body just enough to block her view of the mannequin head, his heart hammering harder than it had all night. "Just tidying up the kitchen, baby." "Bad dream?" She nodded, small and sleepy, rubbing one eye with the back of her hand. "Can I sleep in your bed?" "Of course." He walked her back down the hall, tucked her in, and stayed an extra minute after her breathing slowed, watching her face in the dark, memorizing it the way he'd started memorizing everything lately, afraid of what he might one day forget. He had until morning. He had 4 hours left, and a French braid that still fell apart every single time he tried it. He sat back down at the counter, staring at the wig like it was an opponent instead of a piece of synthetic fiber on a foam head. For a moment, he let himself think about quitting, buying a headband in the morning, telling Sophie the braid hadn't worked out, watching her face fall for half a second before she shrugged it off the way kids do. It would be easier. Nobody would know the difference except him, but he knew he would know. And some quiet, stubborn part of him refused to let this be one more thing he didn't finish. He scrolled past the polished tutorial and found a rougher one, a father actually, filming his own hands on his own daughters, hair in a cluttered bathroom that looked a lot like his own. No ring light, no manicure, just a man narrating slowly, almost apologizing for how long it was taking him. Something about watching another dad fumble through it made Marcus's bay shoulders finally drop an inch. He restarted the wig from scratch. He didn't go back to sleep. He went back to the kitchen, made coffee he didn't need, and pulled the wig toward him one more time. But this time, something had changed. He wasn't thinking about the showcase anymore, or about looking competent in front of other parents, or about proving anything to anyone watching from the folding chairs at Lincoln Elementary. He was thinking about a single memory, Elena, cross-legged on their bed, 6 months pregnant, practicing on a doll because she wanted to be ready. "I want her to feel like someone's hands are careful with her," she'd said, laughing at herself. Is that silly? It wasn't silly. It had never been silly. His hands moved differently after that. Slower, more deliberate. He wasn't chasing a YouTube tutorial's speed anymore. He was trying to give Sophie the same careful hands Elena had promised her before she was even born, back when a braid was just a plan for someday, and someday felt endless. At 3:12 a.m., the braid held. Not a perfect braid. A little loose near the bottom, a stray piece escaping near her temple. But it held, clean and even, all the way down, the way he watched it happen 200 times on a screen, and finally felt happen under his own hands. He stared at it for a long moment, and then, without meaning to, he put his face in his hands and let out the kind of sound that had been building in his chest for 11 months. Not quite a sob. Not quite relief. Something in between. Something that had been waiting a long time to come out. It wasn't really about the braid. It was about every version of himself over the last year that had felt like he was failing her. Every burnt dinner. Every mismatched outfit. Every night he'd sat outside her door, afraid to go in, and admit he didn't know what he was doing. It was about the birthday party he'd almost forgotten. The permission slip he'd signed late. The mornings he'd sent her to school with her socks mismatched, because he simply hadn't noticed. It was about finally, at 3 in the morning, over a wig from a beauty supply store, feeling like maybe, he could actually do this. Maybe he wasn't just surviving fatherhood. Maybe he was learning it. He practiced 2 more times to make sure his hands remembered the motion, whispering the steps to himself under his breath, like a man memorizing a prayer. Then he cleaned up, hid the wig in the hall closet, and went to bed at 4:15, with an alarm set for 6:30. Morning came fast. Too fast. Sophie sat on the bathroom counter, swinging her feet, watching her father in the mirror, with the kind of trust that made his hands tremble all over again. "Are you gonna do it like Emma's mom?" "I'm gonna try my best, baby." He divided her hair the way he'd practiced. 3 strands. Under, over, under. His fingers slipped once. Old muscle memory not quite there yet, and he had to start the section. Again. Sophie didn't complain. She just watched him in the mirror, patient in a way that 7-year-olds usually aren't, humming quietly to herself while he worked. Halfway through, she asked quietly, "Did Mommy teach you?" He paused, his fingers still tangled gently in her hair. "Not exactly, but I think she would have wanted me to figure it out." Sophie nodded, like that answer made perfect sense to her. The way kids sometimes accept the hardest truths more easily than adults do. He finished the braid at 7:52 a. Dark overlay Pam. It wasn't the flawless salon smooth braid from the video. It was a little uneven near the crown, a few flyaways near her ears. But it was whole. It held together, start to finish, exactly the way he needed it to. Sophie turned toward the mirror, tilting her head side to side, studying it like a scientist. Then she looked up at him with an expression that stopped his breathing for a second. "It's perfect, Daddy." She hopped down from the counter before he could say anything back, already talking about which shoes to wear, already moving on to the next small decision of her morning, completely unaware that she's just handed her father the first full night's sleep he'd feel like he'd earned in almost a year. He stood there a moment longer, alone in the bathroom, looking at his own reflection instead of hers. He looked exhausted. He looked, for the first time in a long time, like someone who hadn't given up. At the showcase that evening, Sophie stood on stage with the other kids, her braid catching the gym lights every time she turned her head. Marcus sat in a folding chair between two other parents, phone raised, recording every second like it was something rare. It was. He watched her mouth the words to a song about friendship, watched her scan the crowd until she found his face, watched her smile widen the second their eyes met. For that one moment, nothing else in the room existed, not the other parents, not the noise, not the 11 months behind him, just her, and the braid he'd built at 3 a.m., out of nothing but stubbornness and love. After the performance, Sophie ran straight to him, instead of stopping for cookies at the snack table like the other kids. She threw her arms around his waist and said, muffled against his shirt, "Everyone said my hair looked really good." "Yeah?" His voice came out rougher than he meant it to. "Yeah, I told them my dad did it." Something in his chest cracked open, gently this time, not painfully, not the ache of the last 11 months. Something closer to pride, closer to healing. Driving home that night, Sophie fell asleep in the back seat, her braids slightly loosened from a full day of gym class energy and construction paper crafts. Marcus glanced at her in the rearview mirror at every red light, still not quite believing he'd pulled it off, still turning her words over in his mind. "I told them my dad did it." He thought about all the things he still didn't know how to do, all the birthdays coming, all the school projects, all the moments a single dad wasn't supposed to have to figure out alone. It still scared him. It probably always would. But for tonight, at least, he'd figured out one small, impossible thing. At 2 a.m., alone in his kitchen, on a wig, out of nothing but love and stubbornness, and 4 hours he couldn't afford to lose. He thought, too, about Rachel's text, still sitting unanswered in his phone. Elena would be so proud you're even trying. He believed it now, in a way he hadn't quite let himself believe it at 1:40 in the morning. And maybe that was the whole secret nobody tells you about being a parent after loss. You don't have to know how to do everything. You just have to be willing to sit at your kitchen counter at 2 in the morning and try. Again and again, until your shaking hands finally learn how to hold what matters most. Somewhere between the school gym and his driveway, Marcus realized he wasn't dreading tomorrow morning anymore. For the first time in almost a year, he was looking forward to it. To the small, ordinary miracle of doing his daughter's hair before school, of getting to be the one whose hands she trusted. He carried her inside asleep against his shoulder, careful not to jostle the braid loose completely, careful the way he imagined Elena would have been. He laid her down, pulled the blanket to her chin, and stood in the doorway a moment longer than he needed to, the way he had the night before. Only this time there was no wig hidden in a closet, no secret left to protect. Just a father, a daughter, and one small skill he'd never expected to need, carried, finally, all the way to morning. Back in the kitchen, he found the wig still sitting on the counter where he'd left it, and instead of putting it away, he left it out. He had a feeling he wasn't done needing it yet. Pigtails next month, maybe a fishtail by winter. Whatever came next, he figured he'd learn that one too, one exhausted, stubborn night at a time. If this story moved you, stick around. There are more stories like this one, and I think you'll want to hear the next.